Seth Nelson is the founding attorney and managing partner at NLG Divorce and Family Law. He's a Tampa-based family lawyer known for devising creative solutions to difficult divorce problems. Seth's podcast is called How to Split a Toaster. And to get us started, Seth, I want you to tell us how you came up with that name for the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. First off, I'm really excited to be here and hopefully can give some good content to your listeners. It's a little bit of a debate. Pete and Andy, our producer, who we always say on the show cannot be speak because we don't trust him. But the three of us were kind of going through different names, and it just kind of came organically. So I typically give credit to Pete and Andy, and every now and then they'll throw me a bone.
I think it's a great creative name because it catches some attention. I mean, but like you're divorcing, you can't split a toaster, right?
Exactly. And people will argue and they'll spend, to the point of our show today, a lot of money arguing about items that it's not worth arguing about from a financial perspective. If you have some, I just love this thing and sentimental value, I understand that. But from a financial perspective, go buy a new toaster.
Right. I am all about figuring out priorities in the divorce. What can you not live without? What is a must have? What's a nice to have? What's a I could let that go? And always thinking strategically about what is the cost to fight about this thing, not only the monetary cost, but the emotional cost as well, right?
Oh, you cannot ever get back a day that you spend working on your divorce. And if you're going to have the emotional cost of worrying about X, Y, or Z, you have to decide yourself, do you want to spend your time worrying about X, Y, and Z, or let go, move forward? You can always get more items in the future.
Right. Okay, today I wanted to talk about money advice from a divorce lawyer. And as my audience knows, I talk about money all the time. And so I've got a particular perspective on how you go about sorting out money issues and figuring out what has happened to the money. But I wanted a divorce lawyer to come and talk to us about understanding the divorce finances. I just love the different perspective. And so I want to get right into it with something a little bit negative. Where do you think divorcing people go wrong most often when it comes to the financial part of their divorce?
They don't define what is important to them. So let's just back up for a second. Think of the word peace, Peace. That's an outline for all potential divorces. Now, in each state or jurisdiction, the substance might be different, but generally it's the same. P is a parenting plan, so we're not going to talk about that today. E is equitable distribution, the division of assets and debts. We're talking about money. A is alimony. We're talking about money. C is child support. We're talking about money. E is everything else, which includes attorney's fees. We're talking about money. So just understanding which part of the outline that you're in when you're having discussions with your lawyer or figuring out what's important to you would be step one.
Right. I think it's really important to have your attorney know what's most important to you. And I think that's missing in a lot of these attorney-client relationships where clients come in and they give a big laundry list of important things they want to talk about to their attorney, but they don't prioritize them. So that's one thing that we talk about is prioritizing, where you're saying, hey, listen, I cannot walk away from this marriage without having at least this percentage of the retirement account, or at least having these things in place with the kids, right? I mean, how are you supposed to know with that big laundry list what's the most important to them?
Right. And sometimes they'll have an idea of what's important to them, i.e., I want to keep the house. Okay. That is a position. I want to get into the underlying interests on trying to get to why do you want to keep the house? Well, it's in a good school district and I want to keep the kids in the school district. Well, if that's the goal, maybe we can do that even if we don't keep the house, if we can get other reasonable accommodations in the school district. So it doesn't have to be positional. You have to understand the underlying interest because ultimately, if I'm going to go to trial and argue over who should get the house or whether it should be sold or not, I need to know one, do you want the house? Two, if you receive the house, can you afford the mortgage on it? Three, if you keep the house, but you have to give up retirement in the future, is that a trade that you are willing to make? And that's a client decision with their financial advisor and understanding how money works, but that's not a legal decision. So we have to know about these different competing interests. And maybe that's a different answer for someone who is 35 and is getting back into the workforce, or 40 and has 20, 25, 30 years to rebuild a retirement. But maybe that answer is different if you're dealing with someone who's 53 and their kids are about to graduate in 2 years, but they're not going to have a long runway to rebuild retirement. So it's more important to get half the retirement or more than half as opposed to this marital asset.
Ooh, my favorite topic, getting more than half of the retirement. So many of the women that I work with in the Divorce Money Guide are in a position where they are earning significantly less than their husbands, soon to be ex-husbands. They're earning 30, 40, $50,000 a year, and legitimately, they're just worried about being able to pay the bills every month. There's not going to be anything left over to save for retirement. And so to me, that's when we open up this conversation of, what would it look like if we got 70 or 80% of the retirement account? How do you feel about that?
I think it's a great conversation to have. We all know this. People need money now, and they're going to need money in the future. So you have to make that decision on, do you want to lower your standard of living today, potentially, to get a better standard of living in retirement, or at least have some money in retirement.
Uh-huh.
Now, let's not confuse these two issues. Equitable distribution is the division of assets and debts. So if I could get you 100% of retirement, let's say it's $1 million, or I can get you a house worth the $1 million. Well, you might say, I want the house. It doesn't have a mortgage. I can sell it in the future for retirement. I'm like, okay, but it's got a lot of expenses to keep up $1 million
Right.
home, versus let's downgrade our standard of living, not live in a $1 million home. Let's keep the $1 million in retirement and have it grow. That way, your long term is secure. However, we need to kind of fill this gap. Now, how do we fill that gap financially? Are you or are you not going to receive alimony? And if so, for how much? What, if anything, can you get back and do in the workforce? And a lot of lawyers will advise their clients, don't get back into the workforce. You might get more
Oh,
alimony. I am a huge proponent. Like, please, for the love of God, go get a job
immediately.
to the best of your ability as soon as you can, because you don't want to be 3 years behind if your divorce takes 3 years. You don't want to
Right.
be 2 years behind if your divorce takes two. And it's good for you. It gives you something to do. It's going to show the court that you're trying to gain employment, and you're not going to have this entitlement mentality that judges do not like.
Well, and the financial independence is so key. This is your money that you control. You can work more if you need to, less if you want to. I think that clients often forget, you may get support payments, whether it's child support or alimony, but those support payments could stop at any time. Your ex could get killed in a car accident. They could become disabled and be unable to work. They could choose to stop working. They could work and just choose to stop paying you, and you have to go back to court for a fight to get your money. There's so many variables that can come into play. And I am with you. I hate to hear attorneys say, don't go get a job. It's going to negatively impact your support payments.
I
Worst
could not
advice
agree
ever.
with everything. I could not agree more with everything you said. And especially the financial independence. I tell every single one of my clients, this is going to sound weird, but I hope that you don't get alimony in this case. And they're like, what are you talking about? I said, because I would love to get you enough assets in equitable distribution that spin off an income from those assets that you will control after the dissolution is over, that you control, that support your standard of living when you also go get gainful employment. And then you control it.
So, Seth, states generally have formulas or charts or things like that that help us calculate an appropriate amount of child support or alimony. And I always tell my clients, before you even start negotiating with your ex about what may be paid, either paid by you or received by you, in terms of child support and alimony, you need to go to your state's guidelines and plug in the numbers and figure out, what does the state say is a fair amount. Nine times out of 10, what I see in cases is if we come up with the state calculation saying $1,500 a month of child support, the ex is coming out of the gates saying, I'll offer you $800 a month for child support. Take it or leave it. How do you feel about that whole process? And what do you advise clients on that issue?
So if it is 800 versus 1500, we're $700 apart. Okay. And let's say this is a slam dunk winner for me. They're both W-2 employees. We know what it's going to be. I know I'm going to win. I'm going to ask my client, do you want to go to court on this at my hourly rate? Do we want to spend this potential many hours, which is going to eat up a year and a half of child support? I can't guarantee the court's going to give you the attorney's feedback. Do you want to go argue about that, or do you want to take a lesser amount? Now, a child support case like that is usually pretty quick, so it wouldn't be that much. But depending on the complexity of their incomes, I made it very simple. They're W-2s. But that's the whole point. You have to say, what are we arguing about financially? And how much is it going to cost me to argue about it? Because a dollar earned or a dollar given to you in alimony spends the same way. It's a dollar. The dollars that you spend on your litigation to the lawyer, to the experts. I know we haven't talked about forensic accountants yet, but I think we got some feelings about that we should talk about, which I probably agree with. But when you're spending that money, that is part of that marital pie that you're dividing up on. What are you going to get? What are you not going to get? Are you going to get fees paid back? So you got to look at the full picture, not just, hey, he shorted me $700 a month.
Right. I just think that it's really important to know what your starting point is with the state guidelines, because I think so many people are agreeing to things in their divorces before they even know if the state
Oh,
was taking an objective look, what would they say you're entitled to?
no, 100%. You have to know what you are entitled to, what the law is within a range, and then make the decisions from there. You can't just say, yeah, I'll take the $800. You got to do the analysis.
Okay. So, from the perspective of an attorney, what are the most important financial issues in a divorce that we should be thinking about?
The first one is I need a client to educate themselves or let me educate them on these issues. So you always start with the division of assets. And the reason I always start there is because you may have an income producing asset. So if you have a brokerage account that is being properly managed, and let's just pick a 5% rate of return on $1 million, we know that you're going to get $50,000 of income every year and never touch the principal. So let's look at that first before we start arguing about alimony. Because if you get that brokerage account, then you can not argue over $50,000 a year of alimony because you're saying, I'm gonna have income from that, and you're gonna control it. Okay. So that's the key, is you want to make sure as much as you get, you can control it. Because as you rightly point out, the other side can just stop paying alimony. So I would always start with equitable distribution. Then I would really define what my needs are. What are my
Nice.
needs and my wants for alimony analysis?
Okay, so what can the client do to help prepare that financial case for their best outcome? There's certainly things a client can do to, above and beyond, like we said, preparing and coming up with the lists of needs and wants. What else can they do to help get that better outcome?
Step one, learning about finances is a learned skill, and you're smart. You can do it. Don't be afraid of it.
Agreed.
We got right. So you can learn it. Don't be overwhelmed by it. I mean, it's like eating an elephant one bite at a time. So set aside, because your lawyer is going to say, I need all these documents to review. I need all your bank statements.
Yes.
And it's very overwhelming. You get this very long list. Set aside an hour or two on a Saturday or whatever day works for you and work on it in that time. Give it to your lawyer and then have a quick follow up meeting. This is what I got you. Here's what's next. This is when you're going to have it. But if you just carve out the time, it's not hanging over you all the time. If you're really struggling, set a time with the paralegal or legal assistant to come into the office and help them download all of your stuff, because then when they download it, they can put it right into our system, label it properly, and it will save you time and money. Okay. But then learning where every dollar is coming into you and where it's going out is very powerful. because then you can really start focusing on what's important on, do I really want to buy that? Do I really need that? Is this just a luxury that I can do without? Because you're going to have to make some tough choices.
You and I are on the same page. I tell my clients, set aside 2 hours a week to go through this money stuff. Give yourself literally a timer. Do not do your 2 hours right before bedtime. Oh, I put the
Yeah.
kids to bed and now it's
You'll be
9 p.m. and I'm
stressed.
going to do it. No, that's no good. Do it on a Saturday or Sunday. First thing, just get it over with. Yeah, totally, totally. You it's an overwhelming thing. So it's something we want to procrastinate on. And then all of a sudden you get 10 hours worth of work to do. So little by little, totally with you on that.
That's right. And the other thing is when you get it, decide early on whether the lawyer's team is going to start reviewing and digging into the financials or whether you need a forensic accountant. Because usually, depending on the size of the marital estate, the number of transactions, the number of accounts, and it's not one size fits all. If you get a forensic accountant, one, they might be less expensive than using your lawyer's paralegal. So they can do it quicker at a lower hourly rate, and then I can put them on the stand to testify about it, where I'm not going to put my paralegal on the stand. So talk and have that decision early, because what people say is like, oh, but now I got to pay a forensic accountant a retainer. I just paid a lawyer retainer. But in the long run, it's going to cost you less. So let's just think that through.
You were reading my mind because I was going to ask you, how does a client know what they can do versus what the attorney should do versus what they should have an expert do? I think that's where a lot of cases go wrong. And I don't see attorneys educating their clients enough on what they could do themselves to save some fees and things like that.
Yeah, and it's a balance. It depends on the client's skill set. It depends on, or is it a dissolution marriage without children? Are they working? Are they not working? Do they have the time? Are they just paralyzed by the process? But these are the conversations you have to have. And then you kind of get them one step at a time working on the right path.
I have a huge problem with attorneys saying, I'm going to have my paralegal dig into your bank statements and figure out where your money's going and do the investigation. Because more times than not, I see it being a huge expense. And all of a sudden, the paralegal runs up against a wall and is suddenly completely confused, has botched some of the stuff. Ooh, Seth, I've got a lot of feelings about that. What are your feelings?
Yeah, it depends on the quality of the paralegal, depends on the complexity of the case. I know
That's
exactly
fair.
what you're talking about it because I've seen it in fee hearings when I've argued, Judge, my client shouldn't have to pay for all that work that kind of went nowhere. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of the analysis, but that's why you have to decide whether you need a forensic accountant or not. And also, if you give it to the lawyer, and I can go through that more quickly because I've been doing it for so long and I know what to look for and I understand how you're putting pieces to the puzzle together. I need more than the bank statements. I need the last year and the year W-2. I need the tax return. This is putting a jigsaw puzzle together, and you need to know what pieces you need, right? To start figuring out that process. And then you see something on the tax return like, hey, wait, I didn't see any bank statement on this interest income. So where's this coming from? Right? And so then you go, okay, maybe they didn't produce everything. So it's a jigsaw puzzle, but work closely with your lawyer. Don't just have them hand it off to people. Make sure you understand that you're getting some value for your money. And it's expensive. It takes time, but we want to make sure you understand what's going on the backside of the legal field.
There's so many moving parts to divorce. I think people get overwhelmed and they kind of throw their hands up and just say, okay, Attorney Seth, you take care of my case. I'm paying you a lot of money, so go for it with my case. Is that the right decision or the wrong decision?
No, there's client decisions and there's lawyer decisions. Some people will say, Seth, if you tell me to do this, I'll do it. I said, no, 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 no. The question first is, do you want to accept this offer? And I will give you advice and counsel whether I think it's a good offer, bad offer, whether you should accept it because the cost of litigation will be more than what we're arguing about, whether you just want to be done litigating and get the space between your ears back to what you want to focus on and not your divorce. But accepting or giving an offer is always a client decision. And I have clients that will try to put that on me and I put it right back on them. My job is to give you advice and counsel, not to make the ultimate decision.
I think really the best relationships with divorce attorneys are very give and take. It's a conversation. It's not tell me what to do, and it's not me as client telling you we're going to do this. The better conversations to me are, Seth, I'm inclined to want to fight for this in the divorce and to want to push them on this settlement offer in this area and this area. Can you give me some of the pros and cons to doing that, and tell me, if this was your divorce, what would you do?
Yeah, no, a lawyer is absolutely supposed to be giving the pros and cons. Best case in court, worst case in court. And you should know that all along the way. Now, if I'm telling you, here's your best day, it's X, your worst day is A, and then I get information that changes my legal analysis, I might say, we're now between, S and Q, not A and X. Like we're going to narrow it. It might be different
Hmm.
now. But, you always got to double check, triple check, make sure you're getting the right information, making sure you're getting the right information from the other side so you can do a full analysis.
Okay, one more question for you.
My
What
birthday's
is
July 24th. Oh, that wasn't the question. Okay, go
it
ahead.
sure wasn't. What is your number one best tip for divorcing women to get better financial settlements in their divorces?
Well, there's a really good book they could buy. I know
Is it
that, and I know
called
you
Find Me
weren't
the
looking.
Money?
It is, but I know you weren't looking for that plug. Become educated. Become educated and make those decisions. That's the best thing you can do.
It's so true, because you can't make a good decision if it's not an informed decision. And that's really what we're doing with the Divorce Money Guide, with the Find Me the Money book, is just saying, start to get more information about your financial situation before you agree to things in the divorce. You don't have to lickety split agree to stuff in this divorce. You have time. You're allowed to say, hey, I need to see the financial documents before I make a decision.
1,000%. And not only do you get to see them, you need to make sure you sit down with the lawyer and analyze them and determine whether you need to go to a forensic accountant to do more analysis or go to a financial planner to say, what will this do for me in the future?
Seth Nelson, Florida divorce attorney, tell people where they can find you and your sage counsel after this interview is over.
Oh, you're very kind. So you can just Google um, NLG, Divorce and Family Law, and you'll find us. We're based out of Hillsborough County, Tampa Bay region. We do stuff all over the state, though, and you can always Google how to split a toaster, and that is our divorce podcast about saving your relationships. And I assure you, if you Google how to split a toaster, we're the first thing popping up.
And I also assure you that you can consult the show notes to get all of the relevant links. Thanks so much for being here today, Seth.
Thanks for having me.